Hey guys, and welcome back to another lore tour. I literally just did Amdapor Keep and recorded it and was talking and talking and talking before realizing that my mic was actually off. I only realized it as I looked at the playback. So I'm nice and warmed up, and as a result I should be less scattered than I was in the last video. A couple of people mentioned that I did seem a little bit scattered, and I've taken that in stride, and that's fine. I mean, that's what happens when I'm doing this verbatim. I'm not scripting it. I'm just talking as I'm running, and you know, it's going to come across a little bit scattered sometimes. That's just what it is. Okay, so straight away we got the Circling Condors. Condors are a large subspecies of vulture, of North American vulture. I shouldn't need to explain the omen of circling vultures. That one should be pretty easy. And Poe just laughed at me. Poe just heard me laughing, and he's laughing in the background. Okay, so we're back in Amdapor Keep basically to investigate these rumors of void sent activity. As it turns out, the most likely explanation is that after our last visit, nobody called a cleanup crew. The blood and the gore from the Dullahan cultists we cut up have slowly, incidentally completed a number of the rituals which we were originally sent to interrupt. So basically, we failed. Through no fault of our own, we shouldn't be expected to clean up after ourselves. That's not what Warrior of Lights do. There might be something more sinister going on here, but that's honestly the only explanation we've been offered so far. So there's two theories here. One that I've heard the most is that the Shroud and the Void Sent are competing for possession of the key, since there seems to be this clear point where we stop meeting Shroud mobs and start fighting the Void Sent. My own theory is a little bit different, basically, and it might seem like a pretty trivial distinction, but I think that after the Shroud began to retake the dungeon, the Void Sent ritual started to corrupt both the forest and the keep. So I have a few reasons for that. I'll explain as we go, but firstly, you see here we've got the Megalotragus, the namesake of which is a long extinct megafauna. It was basically like a giant African wildebeest, fossils of which we found and dated to be at the youngest about 1 million years old. And I think the same thing's sort of happening here, because we don't see this Megalotragus anywhere else in the game. We don't see this model anywhere else. It's not in the Shroud, it's not in Thanalan. I suspect that there's some remains of these long extinct megafauna around this area, and that all the voidy goodness that's getting around at the moment has caused them to raise. So we got some vines here. They're reskins of the Kraken's tentacles. That's a solid reuse of assets. I like it. Grey wolves. We didn't have wolves in the first Amdapor Keep. We had it's something else, but we didn't have wolves. And I guess that's just another sort of predatory omen, the same as the vultures in a lot of ways. So we've got an Ochu here. It's a hedgerow Ochu. We're implying that it can't move. It's stuck where it is. It is a hedge. The Ochu is based on first edition Dungeons and Dragons mob called the Otyog. And it was basically imagined to look pretty much as the Ochu looks in the Final Fantasy universe. This big sort of flowery maw with tentacles and teeth and gross. So we're coming up to the first boss here, and this is my second time talking about this. I've had a little bit of time to think. Ankharg, whichever way you want to say it, I'm going to go with Ankharg, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. Was a sort of rare, unique, notorious enemy in Final Fantasy XII. Basically just a special Dullahan. And this iteration is a Dullahan in the most sort of classical sense. The Dullahan is an old Irish folklore, just straight up headless horseman, reaper of souls, riding through the countryside to collect souls that have been marked for death. If you try to interrupt him or watch him while he works, he'll either mark you to be the next one, or he'll whip out your eyes, or something disgusting like that. Now, in terms of the name, I couldn't find anything direct. In terms of direct etymology, direct namesake, I couldn't find anything. So what I've come up with is a bit of a stretch, but I think I make it work. Arg in Gaelic is at, I believe. And Ankh, and I'm taking it as Ankh and not Anch. All I could really come at that with was this sort of old Egyptian symbol of the Ankh being persisting or eternal life. So what we've got is a void sent that is at life, that is being sent forth from the void, rather than at a particular mark, such as the classical Dullahan. It is at life in general. It is something that is reaping souls indiscriminately, which is a sort of creepy, harrowing thought. And I think it fits in here, and I like it, and it might not be what was intended, but, you know, analysis isn't all about working out authorial intention. You might disagree with that, but I like speculating, and that's largely what this channel is about, and I'm going to keep doing it. That said, if anyone can come up with something else for Ankag, Anshag, whatever the hell you want to call him, I'd love to hear your ideas. It's one of those sort of ambiguous ones that can be taken a lot of different ways. I'd love to hear some other opinions. That's just my 2 cents, and it's probably a load of crap, but it is what it is. Demonic Rose, I don't even like. Well, okay, like I was saying, I feel like the void is taking over the shroud here. We literally have a demon marble. We have a marble that has been possessed by the void. I think that's pretty clear evidence for my hypothesis. We've also got a foxglove here, which is a common flower that has these sort of medicinal qualities. It can be used to synthesize medicines that help sort of regulate heart function. So it can be used to treat, you know, people with heart failure, arrhythmia, and stuff like that. But in large doses, it is very poisonous, and it can cause, you know, nausea, vomiting, all of that good stuff. The Woomera is an interesting one. The Woomera is based on a moth, obviously. I mean, what else is that going to be? It's a black... it's not Black Widow, that's a spider. Black Witch Moth is this North American moth, which is taken in North American folklore and Caribbean folklore and West Indian folklore as this sort of omen of death. It'll appear over the bed of a sick person, and then they'll die the next day. Or it'll appear to the family of the departed shortly after their death as an apparition of their spirit traveling to the next world. So that's just sort of fitting in with the theme of the imposition of the void on these more organic shroud mobs. And the Woomera Camper, that is just the pre-larval form of the Woomera. And I expect that if we let it live long enough, they probably would have turned into Woomera. The Lordstool, that's pretty much the same as the Foxglove. I take that to be this sort of general psychotropic mushroom. It has that sort of bluey purple color of just sort of unambiguous, bad, toxic, gross. So now that we're repeating mobs, I've got a moment's reprieve here. The architecture of Amdapor Keep is something that I've always really loved. It was the first endgame dungeon I ever performed. I did it in, you know, all AF gear with a group of FC mates, and we were absolutely shitting our breeches. The Demon Wall was the first DPS check that we'd ever come across in the game. And when you're like I-45, I-50, it's a pretty big deal. It was a pretty tough check. And as a result, this dungeon, this aesthetic really stuck with me. It's that sort of gothic architecture, like I say, that you don't see anywhere else in the game. And all of the enemies, all these void scents, are taken from the same source materials as your typical 19th century Gothic novels. So it really puts you into that sort of headspace in a way that's quite unique among the Final Fantasy XIV dungeons so far. The Treant, that's another first edition Dungeons and Dragons mob for this animate tree, which is of course taken from Tolkien's Ents. You should all know what they are. I shouldn't have to explain them. Now the Boogeyman, this one I really liked. The Boogeyman is this ambiguous icon that sort of doesn't really have a particular form or shape or gender, but appears in almost every culture in every age. Just as a representation of primal fear, and it's something that is particularly associated with children and is used to sort of coerce or entice children with these morality tales about, you know, sucking their thumbs or staying up after bedtime or whatever. And the luminescence is a reference to that as well, this idea that the Boogeyman is a creature of darkness and that it can't get you when the light is on. Which is something that I'm sure that all kids believe. There's this sort of primal instinct to be afraid of the dark. And the Boogeyman is associated with that, obviously, for all children. So these blood moon sacrifices, these are the lambs of Dullahan that we killed in our first foray into the keep. And you can see they're all like covered with mold and they're half decomposed and they're all disgusting. And like I say, that's implied to be the source of these void scent, and how they're issuing forth at the moment is that we didn't clean up these bodies after us. Excuse me, I just need a sip of water here. So the Boogeyman, like I say, this really ambiguous nature, this sort of flexibility, it can take any form, any shape. It lends itself to this illusion magic and this doppelganger thing. I just really enjoyed this. It's another one of these bosses that's just, you know, a reskin of a common mob, like the Abominable Snowman in Snowcloak. And a lot of people sort of gripe about that. Oh, you know, it's lazy, it's reusing assets, whatever. I think this is really well done. I think the animations and the model is just super creepy. I love it. And yes, I'm just making filler for the next pool here. If anyone's wondering what I've been doing the last week, so I released a video like 3 weeks ago, if you've been following, talking about this mic that was in the mail. It was going to show up any day. It still hasn't showed up. I'm still waiting for it to turn up any day, and I've written a whole heap of backlog, but I'm reluctant to record any of the stuff that I've had to like write scripts for, because I'm expecting this mic to show up any minute. And when it does, like I say, I've got this big backlog of writing, and I'm just gonna record for like 24 hours straight. I've got a bunch of really great videos that I've got planned. and yeah, you can expect them all coming in the next week. Okay, so the Fault Finder is basically a term for a sort of critical, nitpicking naysayer, just a person who's very petty in criticism, just criticizes for the sake of criticizing, finding fault. That should be obvious enough. Skeins mate is a Middle English term for a brother-in-arms or a messmate, but it's also used by Shakespeare a number of times to imply prostitution as a sort of cheeky metaphor. So with that in mind, it's basically a synonym for the succubus. The Doriger, in a similar way, is just the Croat term for the gargoyle. So we've got here is the localization team bringing out these synonyms for enemies that we've already kind of encountered, but in a way that sort of makes them uniquely Amdapor-y. Similarly, Nesic is an adjective that we would use to describe a rock formation that has been under intense heat and pressure for a long time, for thousands and thousands of years, until it's basically started to get to the point where it's beginning to melt. So the implication is that this is a very old gargoyle that's been lying dormant for eras and eras and eras, and attests to the antiquity of the Amdapor civilization. Void Syrup, that's an easy one. I shouldn't have to explain that, but I think syrup is like a really good descriptive for the sort of unpleasant consistency of those things. Bloodlapper, I don't need to talk about that. What I really need to do right now is focus on supplementing this bard's DPS so that we don't get smushed by these demon walls. I don't know what happens if we get smushed by them if we don't meet this DPS check. I assume something bad's gonna happen. So let's just get this done. Alright. That was a little close for comfort. But that said, we're at, what are we at? 17 minutes, we're making good time. Okay, here's a boss that a lot of people have been telling me they just find really unsettling. And I like the model. I think it's really good for a void set. But the thing that really tickled me pink here was the namesake. Now, I don't know how many of you have watched my my Gay Bolga video, but if you hadn't, you should. It's a good one. I think you'll enjoy it. Basically, for Dyad, when the hero Kulan, who's the wielder of the Gay Bolg, is training with Skathak, the warrior woman, the Scottish warrior woman, he has this sparring partner named Dyad. And they train together for years and develop this real sort of brotherly, I guess, Skeins mate relationship that some modern commentators have taken to have homoerotic implications, which is interesting. And later, Cuchulainn is in battle, sort of single-handedly besieging this city. He's fallen under his Riastrad and he's just killing everything. Just thousands of people are dropping. And the queen of this besieged city blackmails Dyad into meeting him in battle. Basically by threatening to commission a bard to write this really disparaging but memorable sonnet that will basically eternalized Dyad as this cowardly knave. And that is, of course, the worst thing that you could do to an Irish warrior. So Dyad has no choice but to ride out and meet Cuchulainn in battle. Of course, they're both reluctant to duel, and they make the battle. Hang on a second. Get out of there. They carry this battle on for days and days and days, pushing backwards and forwards, with neither of them really wanting to go all out and go for a killing blow. Until after 5 or 6 days, they basically agree that they're going to have to end it, and that what they've been doing over the last few days has at least given everyone enough of a show that whoever falls is going to have this really spectacular legacy. Now, Cuchulainn is the weapon that can pierce anything, and Fedayad is the armor that is unpierceable. So you have this really interesting relationship. And Fedayad, like literally, his skin cannot be pierced by weapons. So what Cuchulainn does is casts the Gaebolg in the traditional manner from the fork of the toes into Fedayad's anus. And as the Gaebolg does when it enters its victim, it blossoms and splits into barbs upon barbs upon barbs of steel, which just fill Fedayad's entire body and takes several hours to cut out of him. And it's pretty awful, and like I say, some people make these homoerotic implications again, but I was just really stoked that it's happening here again, that I killed him in the same way as Cuchulainn did. I just thought that was really funny. So there's that, there's Amdapor Keep hard mode. I really hope you enjoyed another lore tour. There's going to be plenty more coming. Like I say, my mic should be showing up any day now, and I've got some really interesting stuff coming later in the week as soon as I can record that. But thank you so much for watching, and if you're enjoying this, please let me know, please leave a like, please subscribe if you want to see more, and until then, I will see you in the next episode.